Welcome to The Life and Crimes of Richard Kuklinski, the Iceman. I'm James Harrington, joined by my brilliant co-host, Emily Carter. Today we're diving into the psychology and life of one of the most notorious contract killers in American history. Emily, let's start at the very beginning, Kuklinski's childhood. It's hard to overstate just how violent and traumatic his early years were.
Absolutely, James. Kuklinski was born in Jersey City in 1935, and both of his parents were, frankly, horrifically abusive. His mother, Anna, was a strict Catholic who enforced rigid rules and never showed any warmth or compassion. She'd beat him with a broom for the smallest infractions. And his father, Stanley, was a violent alcoholic who would disappear for stretches, only to return and inflict more beatings. The violence was so severe that Richard's brother actually died from the abuse. That's a level of trauma that shapes a person's entire worldview.
It's chilling, isn't it? I mean, you hear about these backgrounds and you wonder, could that alone explain what Kuklinski became? Or is it just one piece of a much darker puzzle?
That's the big question in forensic psychology, isn't it? I've worked with offenders who had almost identical upbringings, and while many develop issues, not all become killers. But in Kuklinski's case, the violence at home was a catalyst for his aggression, no doubt.
And that aggression started early. There are reports, actually more than reports, Kuklinski himself admitted, that as a child he took out his anger on animals. Cats and dogs mostly. It's a classic warning sign, isn't it?
It is. In the field, we call it the McDonald triad: animal cruelty, fire setting, and bedwetting. Not every child who hurts animals becomes violent, but in Kuklinski's case, it was a clear outlet for his rage. He reportedly committed his first murder at just 14. That's a staggering level of desensitization to violence at such a young age.
It's almost as if he was rehearsing, in a way, practicing violence until it became second nature. And that's a pattern we see in other notorious offenders, isn't it?
Exactly. Early animal cruelty is often a precursor to later violent crimes. It's not a guarantee, but it's a red flag that something is deeply wrong in a child's emotional development.
Now let's talk about Kuklinski's physical presence. He was, by all accounts, a giant of a man, about 6'5", 300 pounds, and covered in tattoos. That alone would make most people think twice before crossing him.
He was absolutely intimidating. His size and demeanour became part of his reputation in the underworld. People genuinely feared him, and that fear was a weapon in itself.
It reminds me of some British criminals I've studied. Sometimes just being physically imposing is enough to get what you want, no violence necessary. But with Kuklinski, it was both the threat and the follow-through.
Right, and that combination, intimidation plus actual violence, made him almost untouchable in those circles. What's so fascinating and honestly disturbing is how he managed to live a double life. He married Barbara Pedrici, had 3 children, and, by all outward appearances, was a devoted family man. His neighbours in Dumont, New Jersey, thought he was just a successful businessman.
His wife Barbara described him as having 2 sides, good Richie and bad Richie. Sometimes he was affectionate, even doting. Other times, explosively violent. She said she never asked questions about his business, probably out of fear. It's remarkable how he compartmentalized his life so completely.
It's a classic case of compartmentalization. The family had no idea about his criminal activities, and even his children were shielded from the worst of his behaviour. But the volatility was always there, simmering under the surface.
So, how did Kuklinski go from a violent young man to a mafia hitman? It started with bootlegging pornographic films in the 1960s. That brought him into contact with the Gambino crime family, especially Roy DeMeo.
And from there, he rose quickly. Between 1965 and 1985, he became a contract killer for the mafia. It's interesting how his criminal roles evolved, from business-like vice, like distributing illegal films, to routine, almost industrialized killing.
It's as if the business side of crime was just a stepping stone. Once he proved himself reliable and ruthless, He was trusted with more serious and deadly work.
Exactly. And the mafia valued that reliability. He was someone who could get the job done, no questions asked. Now, let's talk about what made Kuklinski infamous. The methods he used. He was called the Iceman because he literally froze his victims' bodies to disguise the time of death. The case of Louis Masguet is the most famous. He kept the body in a freezer for over 2 years before dumping it.
He also used cyanide, shootings, strangulation. He adapted his methods to the situation. It's almost clinical, the way he approached murder. The plastic wrapping, the freezing, the poisons. It was all about avoiding detection.
That methodical approach says a lot about his psychological state. He wasn't just violent, he was calculating. There's a difference between impulsive rage and cold, planned execution. Kuklinski was the latter, through and through.
He was convicted of 5 murders. George Maliband, Gary Smith, Daniel Deppner, Louis Masguet, and Paul Hoffman. But he claimed to have killed over 100 people, sometimes even 200. Most experts and law enforcement are skeptical of those numbers.
It's a classic case of grandiose self-narratives. Offenders like Kuklinski often exaggerate their exploits to boost their own mythos. It's about control, power, and, frankly, attention. The reality is, while he was certainly prolific, the true number is almost certainly much lower than he claimed.
And he boasted about involvement in major mafia hits. But most of those claims have been disputed or outright debunked. It's hard to separate fact from fiction with someone like him.
Exactly. The myth becomes part of the legacy, but it's important to stick to what's actually been corroborated.
So, how did law enforcement finally catch up with him? It took an 18-month undercover operation. ATF agent Dominic Polifrone posed as a criminal associate, recording Kuklinski's confessions and gathering evidence.
Those taped conversations were crucial. Kuklinski talked openly about his methods, even discussing how he'd used cyanide. Eventually, that evidence led to his arrest in December 1986. It's a testament to the patience and persistence of law enforcement.
And it's almost cinematic, isn't it? The undercover agent, the recorded confessions, it's the stuff of crime dramas, but it was all too real.
After his arrest, Kuklinski was sentenced to multiple life terms in 1988. He wouldn't have been eligible for parole until he was 111 years old. But what's fascinating is how he became a minor media celebrity while incarcerated. He gave sensational interviews, inspired documentaries, and even books.
And there was a lot of psychological analysis done on him. He was diagnosed with antisocial and paranoid personality disorders. It's rare to get such a detailed look into the mind of a contract killer, but Kuklinski seemed to relish the attention.
He did. And those interviews, especially the HBO documentaries, really cemented his place in true crime lore. But they also gave us a window into the mind of someone who could kill without remorse.
Kuklinski's story ends in prison. He developed Kawasaki disease and died in 2006 at the age of 70, after 18 years behind bars. There's even a strange footnote. His ex-wife signed a "do not resuscitate" order before his death. And when the hospital called to ask if she wanted to rescind it, she declined.
It's a fittingly cold end for someone who lived such a violent life. But his legacy endures. In criminology, in pop culture, in endless debates about the roots of evil. Films, documentaries, books, they all keep the myth of the Iceman alive.
And that's what makes his story so enduring. It's not just about the crimes, but about the questions he leaves us with. About nature, nurture, and the darkness that can lurk behind the most ordinary of facades. Emily, it's been a fascinating discussion. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, James. And thanks to everyone listening. We'll be back with more true crime stories and psychological deep dives. Until next time, take care.
Goodbye, Emily. Goodbye, everyone.